The crystal-clear waters of Nexus Prime's largest recreational facility sparkled under the artificial suns that powered the massive dome. Representatives from 47 different species had gathered for the Galactic Youth Cultural Exchange, a prestigious event that happened only once every solar cycle. The aquatic center was the crown jewel of the facility, designed to accommodate the diverse needs of species from across the galaxy. Captain Sarah Chen watched from the observation deck as hundreds of young beings from different worlds splashed, swam, and played in the various pools designed for their specific biological requirements. The methane breathers had their own sealed environment, while the silicon-based youngsters enjoyed heated mineral baths. The sight filled her with wonder, even after 15 years of serving aboard human diplomatic vessels. "Remarkable, isn't it?" came a melodic voice beside her. Sarah turned to see Ambassador Veltar of the Crystalline Collective, his translucent body shimmering with patterns of blue and green. "To think that so many different forms of life can coexist peacefully." Sarah nodded, adjusting her universal translator. "It gives me hope for the future. These kids don't see the barriers that adults do." The human delegation had arrived 3 days ago, and Sarah had been amazed by how quickly the human children had integrated with their alien counterparts. Humans were still considered newcomers to the galactic community, having made first contact only 30 years ago. Many species viewed them with curiosity, others with caution. Down in the main pool area, 12-year-old Marcus Thompson was teaching a group of young Zephyrians how to play water volleyball. The Zephyrians, with their feathered bodies and hollow bones, struggled with the concept of deliberately submerging themselves, but Marcus's patience and enthusiasm were infectious. "The trick is to trust the water," Marcus called out, demonstrating a gentle backstroke. "Don't fight it, work with it." Near the edge of the pool, young Kessa from the aquatic world of Tidal's Rest watched the game with intense curiosity. Her people were natural swimmers, spending most of their lives in the vast oceans of their homeworld. She had webbed hands and feet, with gills that could process both water and air. Despite her aquatic nature, she seemed hesitant to join the larger group. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the human delegation's xenobiologist, noticed Kessa's isolation and approached her slowly. "Hello there," she said gently, her translator converting her words into the melodic tones of Kessa's native language. "I'm Dr. Rodriguez. You're from Tidal's Rest, aren't you?" Kessa's large, dark eyes focused on Elena with surprise. Most adults at these events were too busy with diplomatic protocols to notice individual youngsters. "Yes, honored doctor, I am Kessa, daughter of reef singer Noram. Your father is the famous explorer who mapped the abyssal territories," Elena said with genuine admiration. "You must be very proud." A shadow passed over Kessa's features. "Yes, he is very brave. He says I should be like him, fearless in the deep waters." Elena detected the uncertainty in the young alien's voice. "Being careful isn't the same as being afraid, Kessa. Even the best swimmers respect the water." Before Kessa could respond, a commotion erupted near the deep diving section of the pool complex. The area was designed for species that enjoyed extreme depths, with specialized pressure systems that could simulate the conditions of various homeworlds. A young cetacean from the gas giant Nimbus was showing off for a group of admirers, diving deeper and deeper into the pressurized chamber. The cetaceans were known for their ability to withstand crushing atmospheric pressure, but this particular pool was calibrated for multiple species, not just their extreme physiology. "Look how deep I can go," the young cetacean called out, his voice carrying through the water via bioacoustic speakers. "Deeper than any of you surface dwellers." The other youngsters cheered and encouraged him. Not understanding the danger, the pool's safety systems were sophisticated, but they relied on each species staying within their designated zones. The young cetacean was venturing into areas meant for much smaller beings. Sarah noticed the commotion first, from her vantage point on the observation deck. Her human eyes, trained for pattern recognition and threat assessment, spotted the warning lights beginning to flash around the deep pool's control station. "Something's wrong," she said to Ambassador Veltar, pointing toward the activity below. The crystalline diplomat's patterns shifted to concerned yellow. "The pressure readings are fluctuating. That young one is disrupting the calibration." What happened next unfolded in terrifying slow motion, the young cetacean, pushing himself deeper than ever before, suddenly found himself caught in a pressure differential as the pool's systems struggled to compensate for his presence in the wrong zone. The water around him began to churn violently. In that chaos, little Kessa, who had been watching from the pool's edge, lost her footing on the slippery deck. She tumbled forward, not into the safe shallow area, but directly into the turbulent deep section where the pressure systems were malfunctioning. The pool's emergency protocols activated immediately, but they were designed to safely evacuate the intended user, the young cetacean who could survive the extreme pressures. The systems didn't account for a small aquatic being like Kessa being caught in the wrong environment. Panic spread through the pool area as various species realized what was happening. The Zephyrians, with their hollow bones, couldn't possibly survive the pressure. The crystalline youngsters would shatter under such conditions. Even the robust youngsters from high-gravity worlds weren't equipped for the crushing force of the malfunctioning system. Pool supervisors from various species rushed toward the emergency controls, but the safety protocols were locked in a complex sequence designed to protect the cetacean while gradually normalizing the pressure. It would take precious minutes to override. In the water, Kessa was in serious trouble. Despite her aquatic nature, the violent pressure changes and churning water were beyond anything her young body could handle. Her natural swimming abilities meant nothing in the chaos of competing currents and crushing force. Sarah watched in horror from above, her mind racing through possible solutions. The other adults were frozen by protocol and the sheer technical complexity of the situation. Each species had their own procedures, their own safety measures, their own limitations. But Sarah was human, and humans had a reputation throughout the galaxy for one particular trait. They rarely let impossible odds stop them from trying. Without hesitation, Sarah vaulted over the observation deck's railing, using her momentum to dive directly toward the pool complex below. Her military training kicked in as she calculated angles and distances in midair. Ambassador Veltar's shocked crystalline patterns flashed behind her as she disappeared from view. The fall was 20 meters, but Sarah had trained for high-altitude water insertions during her military career. She hit the water at the optimal angle, her human physiology absorbing the impact that might have seriously injured beings with different bone density or body composition. The moment she entered the chaotic water, Sarah felt the crushing pressure trying to overwhelm her. But humans, as it turned out, had a unique advantage. Their bodies were remarkably adaptable to pressure changes compared to species that had evolved in more stable environments. Sarah's lungs compressed, her heart rate automatically adjusted, and her nervous system managed the shock of the extreme environment. Swimming through the turbulent water required every bit of her endurance training. The pressure differential created currents that pulled in multiple directions, and the water itself seemed to have taken on a life of its own. But Sarah pressed forward, her eyes fixed on the small form of Kessa tumbling helplessly in the mechanical chaos. Reaching the young alien required Sarah to dive deeper than she had ever gone before. Her ears popped painfully as the pressure increased, and her vision began to narrow. But her human determination, that stubborn refusal to give up that had driven her species from their single world to the stars, kept her moving forward. When she finally reached Kessa, the young alien was barely conscious, her gills working frantically but finding no relief in the chaotic water. Sarah wrapped her arms around the small form and began the difficult journey back to safety. The ascent was even more challenging than the descent. Fighting against the artificial currents while carrying Kessa pushed Sarah's human endurance to its absolute limit. Her lungs burned for air. Her muscles screamed in protest, and the pressure changes made her feel like her head might explode. But she kept swimming, kept climbing through the water, driven by the simple human belief that no child should die while adults stood by helplessly. It wasn't logic or protocol that moved her forward. It was pure, stubborn human will. Above them, the pool's systems finally began to stabilize as technicians managed to override the emergency sequence. The churning water started to calm, and the pressure began to normalize. But Sarah and Kessa were still trapped in the deep section, and Sarah's strength was failing fast. Just when she thought she might not make it, strong hands grabbed her shoulders. Marcus Thompson, the 12-year-old who had been teaching water volleyball, had organized a chain of the stronger swimming species. The young Zephyrians might not be able to handle the pressure, but some of the others could at least help with the final push to safety. Together, the diverse group of youngsters pulled Sarah and Kessa to the surface, where emergency medical teams from a dozen different species were waiting. As they broke through into the artificial sunlight, Sarah gasped for air while still clutching the unconscious form of little Kessa. The medical teams took over immediately, their advanced equipment working to stabilize Kessa's condition. Dr. Rodriguez was among them, her expertise in xenobiology proving crucial as she helped coordinate care between species with vastly different physiological needs. Sarah found herself sitting on the pool deck, wrapped in thermal blankets, while a healer from the Empathic Collective worked to treat her pressure-related injuries. Around her, the gathered beings from dozens of worlds looked on with expressions that needed no translation. It was wonder and respect, and something that might have been the beginning of understanding about what humans truly were. The medical bay of Nexus Prime's diplomatic facility hummed with activity as beings from across the galaxy worked together to monitor Kessa's recovery. The young aquatic alien had been unconscious for 6 hours, her unique physiology requiring careful attention from specialists who understood the intricate balance of her dual respiratory system. Sarah sat in the waiting area, her own injuries mostly healed thanks to the advanced medical technology available on the station. The pressure damage to her inner ears had been repaired, and the microfractures in her ribs from the crushing forces were already mending, but she refused to leave until she knew Kessa would be all right. Dr. Rodriguez emerged from the treatment room, her face showing both exhaustion and relief. "She's going to be fine," she announced to the assembled group. "Her gills were damaged by the pressure differential, but they're regenerating. Her people have remarkable healing abilities when it comes to respiratory trauma." A collective sigh of relief swept through the waiting area, where representatives from dozens of species had gathered. Sarah noticed that many of them were looking at her with expressions she couldn't quite interpret. There was curiosity there, certainly, but also something deeper. Ambassador Veltar approached her, his crystalline form shimmering with patterns of gold and silver that her translator indicated as deep respect. "Captain Chen, what you did today was—" He paused, searching for words. "There is no precedent in our records for such an action." "Any parent would have done the same," Sarah replied simply, but Veltar's patterns shifted to indicate disagreement. "No," he said gently. "That is where you are wrong. We have protocols for such situations, procedures, safety measures designed to prevent exactly the kind of impulsive action you took." His patterns shifted again. "But you humans seem to have a different relationship with impossible situations." Before Sarah could respond, a commotion near the medical bay entrance drew everyone's attention. A massive figure was approaching, its form so large that the automated doors had to expand to their maximum setting to allow entry. Reef singer Noram had arrived. Kessa's father was an impressive sight even by galactic standards. Standing nearly 4 meters tall when fully upright, his body was adapted for the crushing depths of Tidal's Rest's abyssal zones. His skin had a blue-green metallic sheen, and his eyes were large and dark, designed to gather the faintest traces of light in the deep ocean. Despite his intimidating size, his movements were graceful and fluid, betraying his aquatic nature. The assembled beings instinctively stepped back as he entered, not from fear but from respect. Reef singer Noram was a legend among his people, known for exploring regions of their homeworld so deep and dangerous that no one else dared attempt the journey. But as he approached the medical bay, Sarah could see something in his posture that his imposing size couldn't hide. He was afraid. This being who faced the crushing depths of alien oceans without hesitation was terrified for his daughter. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward to greet him, but Noram's attention was fixed on Sarah. He moved toward her with that fluid grace, and when he was close enough, he did something that shocked everyone present. He knelt. This massive being, this legendary explorer, lowered himself until his head was level with Sarah's, and when he spoke, his voice carried the deep, resonant tones of his people's ancient songs. "Human," he said, and the word somehow carried more weight and meaning than any formal title. "You saved my daughter's life." Sarah felt uncomfortable with the formality of the moment. "I did what anyone would do," she began, but Noram interrupted her with a gesture. "No," he said, echoing Ambassador Veltar's earlier words. "You did what no one else could do. I have studied the records of what happened, the pressure readings, the environmental conditions, the physical stresses involved." His large eyes focused on her with intensity. "No other species represented at this gathering could have survived what you endured to reach my daughter." Dr. Rodriguez stepped closer, her scientific mind engaging with the implications. "He's right, Sarah. I've been reviewing the data with the medical teams. The pressure differential in that pool reached levels that would have been fatal to most species. The cetaceans can handle extreme pressure, but not the rapid changes. The crystalline beings would have shattered. The gas-adapted species would have been crushed instantly. But humans," Noram continued, "your species has something that makes you uniquely suited for such extremes, not because you are the strongest or the fastest or the most pressure-resistant, but because you can adapt to conditions that would kill others, and you will endure pain that would stop others from acting." Sarah was beginning to understand the implications of what had happened, but she was interrupted by the arrival of another group. The other young beings from the cultural exchange were approaching, led by Marcus Thompson and several of the alien youngsters who had helped with the rescue. Young Marcus stepped forward, his 12-year-old voice carrying a maturity beyond his years. "Captain Chen," he said formally, "we wanted to thank you. All of us." He gestured to the diverse group behind him. "What you did showed us something important." A young crystalline being named Resonance stepped forward next, her translucent form flickering with patterns of admiration. "In our culture, we value precision and careful planning. We do not act without extensive calculation and risk assessment." Her patterns shifted to something like wonder. "But you acted without hesitation, without calculation. You simply saw a need and responded." A Zephyrian youngling with pale blue feathers added his own thoughts. "My people prize our ability to soar above problems, to find solutions through elevation and perspective. But sometimes, someone needs to dive into the problem itself." The pattern continued as each young being shared their perspective on what they had witnessed. Sarah began to realize that her actions had been interpreted not just as a rescue, but as a demonstration of something fundamentally different about human nature. Dr. Rodriguez was recording everything, her scientific mind recognizing the significance of the moment. "What you're all describing," she said carefully, "is what we might call the human approach to crisis response. It's not unique to Captain Chen. It's a characteristic of our species." Ambassador Veltar's patterns shifted to intense curiosity. "Please explain, Dr. Rodriguez. This could have significant implications for our understanding of human psychology." Elena considered her words carefully. Humans evolved under conditions that required rapid adaptation to changing environments. Unlike species that evolved in stable conditions, we had to deal with ice ages, continental drift, dramatic climate changes, predator pressure, and resource scarcity that could change within a single generation. She gestured towards Sarah. This created a species that doesn't just survive extreme conditions. We're driven to act in extreme conditions. When other species see an impossible situation and logically conclude that intervention would be futile, humans often see the same situation and think, someone has to try. Reef singer Noram's deep voice rumbled with understanding. This explains much about your people's reputation in the galaxy. You are known for attempting things that others consider impossible. Not just attempting, added a new voice from the medical bay entrance. They all turned to see that Kessa had awakened and was being supported by a medical aide as she walked slowly toward them. Despite her ordeal, her large eyes were bright with intelligence and curiosity. "Father," she said in her melodic language, which the translators converted for everyone present, "I remember what happened. The human did not just attempt to save me. She succeeded where others could not even try." Kessa looked directly at Sarah, and her expression held a wisdom that seemed older than her years. "In our deepest trenches, we have a saying. The current that seems impossible to fight is the one that carries you to new waters. I think humans understand this saying better than even we do." The young alien paused, gathering strength for what she wanted to say. "While I was unconscious, I dreamed of the deep currents of my homeworld. But in my dream, they were not dark and cold as they are in reality. They were warm and filled with light, because someone was swimming beside me who refused to let the darkness win." Sarah felt a strange emotion building in her chest. She had acted on instinct, driven by simple human compassion, but she was beginning to understand that her actions had created something larger than a rescue. Marcus spoke up again, his young voice carrying conviction. "My grandmother always told me that humans have a saying, 'It takes a village to raise a child.' But I think what happened today shows something different. Sometimes it takes one person willing to risk everything to remind the village what's truly important." Dr. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. "There's something else to consider. Captain Chen didn't just save Kessa's life. She demonstrated something about human nature that could change how our species is perceived in the galactic community." Ambassador Veltar's patterns shifted to deep consideration. Indeed, for 30 years since first contact, many species have wondered about humanity's place in the galactic order. You are not the strongest, fastest, most intelligent, or most technologically advanced species we have encountered. He paused, his crystalline form reflecting the medical bay's lights in complex patterns. "But today, we observed something that may be more valuable than any of those attributes. When faced with a situation where logic, protocol, and safety considerations all suggested that action was impossible, a human acted anyway, and succeeded." Reef singer Noram stood to his full, impressive height, his voice carrying the formal tones of an official declaration. "This event will be recorded in the chronicles of my people, not just as the day a human saved my daughter, but as the day we learned what humans truly are." His large eyes swept across the assembled beings. "They are not the species that can survive anything. They are the species that will try to survive anything. And in a galaxy full of impossible things, that distinction may be the most important one of all." As the group stood in the medical bay, surrounded by the gentle hum of technology that represented the cooperation of dozens of species, Sarah realized that something fundamental had changed. Not just in how the other species saw humans, but in how she understood her own people's place among the stars. The rescue was over, but the real story was just beginning. 3 months after the incident at Nexus Prime, the ripple effects of Sarah's actions had spread far beyond what anyone could have predicted. The story had traveled through galactic communication networks. But it wasn't the dramatic rescue that captured the imagination of billions of beings across the galaxy. It was what the rescue represented. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Harmony, watching as they approached the confluence, the massive space station that served as the galactic community's center of government. She had been summoned to address the Interspecies Council, something that had never happened to a human before. Dr. Elena Rodriguez joined her at the viewport, carrying a datapad filled with the research that had consumed her life for the past 3 months. The preliminary reports from the xenopsychology teams are fascinating, Sarah. Your actions have triggered a fundamental reassessment of human capabilities across 47 different species. I just saved a kid from drowning, Sarah replied. But Elena shook her head. No, you did something much more significant than that. You demonstrated a survival trait that other species are calling adaptive heroism, the ability to act effectively in conditions that should be impossible to survive. Elena's datapad showed complex charts and graphs, the result of extensive testing and analysis. Look at this data. We've been working with volunteers from different species, creating controlled scenarios that simulate crisis conditions. The results are remarkable. She highlighted a series of test results. When faced with a scenario where success requires entering an environment that logic says is unsurvivable, 93% of test subjects from other species either refuse to attempt the action or fail within the first few seconds of trying. And humans? Sarah asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. 78% of human volunteers not only attempt the action but succeed in completing the objective, even when success requires enduring conditions that cause significant physical distress. Elena looked up from her datapad. Sarah, we're not just talking about bravery or recklessness. We're talking about a fundamental difference in how humans process the relationship between risk and necessity. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Marcus Thompson, now 13, and serving as a junior cultural liaison for the human delegation. The young man had become something of a celebrity himself after organizing the rescue chain that helped save both Sarah and Kessa. Captain Chen, Marcus said formally, then grinned and dropped back into his normal tone. The council representatives are ready to meet with you, and Sarah? Some of them are pretty excited to finally understand what makes humans different. As they made their way through the confluence's vast corridors, Sarah was struck by the changes in how other beings reacted to her presence. Before the incident, humans had been treated with polite curiosity, as newcomers still finding their place in galactic society. Now, the looks she received carried something approaching awe. They passed a group of young crystalline beings who stopped their conversation to watch her go by, their forms shifting through patterns of respect and admiration. Near a transport hub, a delegation of Zephyrians actually bowed as she passed, their feathered heads dipping in a gesture she had never seen directed at a human before. "This is making me uncomfortable," Sarah murmured to Elena. "It should," came a familiar melodic voice from behind them. They turned to see reef singer Noram approaching, his massive form moving with that characteristic fluid grace. Beside him walked Kessa, now fully recovered and wearing the ceremonial robes of a cultural ambassador for her people. "Honored reef singer," Sarah said, offering the formal greeting appropriate to his status. But Noram gestured for her to stop. "Please, Captain Chen. After what you have done for my family and my people, formality seems insufficient." His deep voice carried warmth that the translators somehow managed to convey. "I wanted to speak with you before your address to the council." Kessa stepped forward, her large dark eyes bright with intelligence and purpose. "Captain Chen, what you did for me has changed more than just my life. It has changed how my entire species understands the concept of heroism." She gestured to a small device she carried, which projected a holographic display. These are the current applications for the Deepest Current Academy, our most elite training program for exploration and rescue in the abyssal zones of our homeworld. The hologram showed statistics that made Sarah gasp. Applications had increased by 400%, with candidates citing inspiration from the human example as their primary motivation. You see, Kessa continued, my people have always valued careful preparation and extensive training before attempting dangerous tasks. But your actions showed us that sometimes preparation cannot account for every variable, and that the willingness to act despite unknown risks can be more valuable than perfect planning. Noram nodded, his expression serious. This philosophy has spread beyond just rescue training. Our engineers are attempting projects they previously considered too dangerous. Our scientists are exploring research that they once deemed impossible. Our artists are creating works that push beyond traditional boundaries. All because one human refused to let logic stop her from saving a child, Elena murmured, making notes on her datapad. They were joined by Ambassador Veltar, whose crystalline form was shifting through patterns that indicated deep excitement. Captain Chen, I bring remarkable news from my people. The Crystalline Collective has voted to establish the first joint human crystalline research initiative in our history. Sarah looked puzzled. What kind of research? Crisis adaptation protocols, Veltar replied. For 3,000 years, my people have approached problems through precise calculation and careful analysis, but we have observed that there are situations where such methods are insufficient. We wish to learn from human crisis response techniques. As they continued toward the council chambers, they encountered more representatives bringing similar news. The Zephyrians wanted to establish joint atmospheric rescue services. The Methane Collective was interested in human approaches to survival in hostile environments. Species after species was discovering applications for what they were calling the human factor. Dr. Rodriguez was recording everything, her scientific mind racing to keep up with the implications. Sarah, do you realize what's happening? Your single act of rescue has triggered a fundamental shift in how dozens of species approach problem solving. But why? Sarah asked. I didn't do anything that special. I saw someone in trouble and I helped. That's exactly the point, came a new voice. They turned to see Council Speaker Orvani, the elderly representative of the Timeless Collective who had served as the Galactic Government's primary mediator for over 2 centuries. Speaker Orvani was a being of incredible age and wisdom, her translucent form flickering with the accumulated knowledge of millennia. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of galactic authority. Captain Chen, she said with formal dignity, what you describe as nothing special represents a fundamental approach to reality that most species in our community have never encountered. She gestured for them to walk with her as she explained. For billions of years, life in the galaxy has evolved toward specialization and optimization. Species develop specific advantages for specific environments and situations. This has created a galactic community where we solve problems through cooperation and careful application of specialized abilities. They entered a vast observation area where the beauty of the galaxy stretched out before them through massive transparent walls. But you humans represent something different. You are not optimized for any specific environment or challenge. Instead, you are optimized for adaptation itself. Speaker Orvani's form shifted as she continued. When faced with an impossible situation, most species ask, how can our specific abilities solve this problem? But humans ask, how can I change myself to solve this problem? The difference is profound. Sarah found herself staring out at the stars, trying to understand the magnitude of what was being discussed. You're saying that humans are valuable not because of what we can do, but because of what we're willing to try to do? More than that, Speaker Orvani replied. You are valuable because you demonstrate that the impossible is often simply the untried. In a galaxy full of ancient species with established ways of thinking, humans represent the radical possibility of change. They were interrupted by the arrival of Marcus and a group of young beings from various species. The teenager stepped forward with the confident bearing of someone who had found his purpose. "Speaker Orvani, Captain Chen," he said formally. "We wanted to share something before the council session begins." He gestured to his diverse group of companions. "We've been working together on a project inspired by what happened at Nexus Prime." A young crystalline being named Resonance stepped forward. "We call it the Impossible Solutions Initiative. Each of our species contributes their traditional problem-solving approaches, but we apply them using human-style crisis response methods." A Zephyrian youngling with silver feathers added, "We've already solved 3 engineering problems that had been considered impossible for decades. Not by finding new technology, but by combining existing capabilities in ways that required us to work outside our comfort zones." Kessa stepped forward last. "The most important discovery has been that when different species attempt to think like humans, we don't become more reckless. We become more creative. We start to see possibilities that our traditional thinking patterns made invisible." Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her furiously working datapad. "This is extraordinary. You're describing a fundamental shift in galactic problem-solving methodology, and it all started with one impulsive act of heroism." Speaker Orvani's ancient form flickered with what might have been amusement. "Dr. Rodriguez, one thing we have learned in our long study of galactic civilization is that the most profound changes often begin with the simplest acts. A being sees another being in distress and chooses to help despite the risks. Such moments have shaped the course of history more often than grand strategies or magnificent technologies." As they prepared to enter the council chambers, Sarah realized that she was not just about to address the leaders of galactic civilization. She was about to participate in a moment that would define humanity's role among the stars for generations to come. But as she looked around at the diverse group of beings who had become her friends and colleagues, she understood that the most important change had already happened. The barriers between species had not disappeared, but they had become permeable. The different approaches to life and problem-solving had not merged, but they had begun to dance together in new patterns. "One last thing, Captain Chen," Speaker Orvani said, as the massive doors to the council chambers began to open. "The council has made a decision regarding humanity's status in the galactic community." Sarah felt her heart rate increase. Humanity's trial membership period was coming to an end, and their permanent acceptance was not guaranteed. Due to the events at Nexus Prime and their aftermath, the Council has voted to offer humanity full membership with a unique designation. Speaker Orvani's form shifted through patterns of deep respect. "You will be the first species in galactic history to hold the title of Crisis Adaptation Specialists." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked. "It means," Speaker Orvani replied as they entered the vast chamber where representatives from hundreds of species waited, "that when the galaxy faces the impossible, we will call upon humanity to show us new ways to try." As Sarah walked toward the speaking platform, surrounded by beings from across the galaxy who now looked upon humans with respect and hope, she realized that saving one child from drowning had somehow become the key to saving humanity's place among the stars. The impossible, it seemed, was just another word for something humans hadn't tried yet. And in a vast galaxy full of wonders and challenges, that willingness to try might be the most valuable gift her species could offer to the universe.